Welcome to No One is Normal, the podcast where real stories remind us that none of us are alone. You can also visit the website www.bradhhill.com or www.nooneisnormal.co for resources, updates, and future podcast episodes. I am Brad H. Hill, and each week we talk about the messy, the complicated, and the deeply human moments that shape us and remain in our memories. I am not here to tell anyone how to live. I am here to offer the stories, the insights that made me realize that no one is normal, including me, because healing starts when self-honesty begins. Welcome to episode 1, the story behind the book. First and foremost, I didn't write the book because I had everything figured out. Far from it. I wrote it because for a long time I was unsure of who I even was. And I don't mean that in some sort of philosophical way. I mean I was lost in a very real, very silent kind of way. The kind that nobody sees on the outside. I was the person who looked fine. I worked hard, kept moving, said all the right things. But deep down I was hoping nobody would ever look close enough to see how much I was falling apart on the inside. Most of us get really good at pretending, and I was no different. I told myself I was strong enough, sharp enough, smart enough, and successful enough, when really I was exhausted, and ashamed, and terrified of being seen for who I really was. Someone held together with just hopes and prayers. This book didn't come from a place of confidence, it came from a place of collapse. And writing it forced me to stop long enough to ask a simple question I had avoided most of my life. What actually happened to me? And maybe more important, what did it turn me into? If you're listening right now, and you've ever felt like the story of your life is too complicated, too messy, too heavy, to ever speak out loud, this is for you. I want to be clear about something from the beginning. I didn't write this book to make it about me. I didn't write it to put my life under a spotlight. I wrote this book because I wanted to reach people who feel like their story is too heavy, too complicated, or too painful to ever say out loud. I wrote it for the people who feel like their past is something they have to hide. For the ones who think no one would understand, or my story doesn't matter, or if people knew the real me, I'd be judged. This book was written to show that it does matter. That your story is important, and that silence sometimes keeps things festering. The book was never about Bonnie or myself. It was about what happens when people finally stop pretending and start telling the truth, even when it hurts. And I want to say this, Bonnie didn't want to go back into her past. She didn't want to revisit the trauma she lived through. She didn't want to reopen the wounds she spent years trying to bury. I still recall waking her up or holding her tightly when she was having nightmares. Just that action helped calm her down to allow her to fall back asleep. When I asked her if she was willing to tell her story, she hesitated. Not because she was ashamed, but because revisiting that pain costs something. Walking back into it takes courage most people never see. And that is why her story is in this book. Because she represents so many people who stay silent. Not because they are weak, but because of the weight of their truth is overwhelming. This book and podcast exists for one reason, to show people that their story matters, and that speaking it out loud might be the first step towards healing. Not just for them, but for someone else who needs to hear it. It helps to know we are not alone in our struggles, and that others are going through similar things. There were moments in my life when everything felt too hard to bear. When you keep blaming yourself and can't get out of your own head. Some moments hit like a freight train. Some tear your world open in a single second. Some force you to face consequences you cannot outrun. For me, one of those moments was in high school. I lost a friend in a car accident. I wasn't a part of the accident, but my decision not to pick her up resulted in her last morning on earth. One decision, one moment, a ripple that didn't disappear when the wreck was cleared or the dust settled. It followed me. It haunted me. It forced me to confront a truth no one wants to say out loud. Sometimes your decisions don't just hurt you. Sometimes they hurt other people. Sometimes you don't get a second chance to undo it. That was a wound I lived with for years. And carrying it alone wasn't making me better, it was destroying me. Another turning point came later in life when I stopped blaming myself for everything and started understanding the whole picture. The trauma behind my choices, the pain I tried to bury, the way I had been living in survival mode. It took years to admit the truth. I wasn't just dealing with what I had done. I was carrying everything that had ever been done to me as well. I turned all of it into ammunition against myself. If I messed up, I used it as proof. If I failed, I told myself I should have been better. I built in excuses, so I never had to face the real issue. I was standing in my own way, sabotaging every part of my life without even realizing it. For a long time, I thought holding on was my way of being accountable, like punishing myself would somehow balance the scales. But all it did was keep me stuck in the same moments. Long after life had moved on, I kept replaying the guilt, I kept replaying the loss, replaying the version of myself I thought I was supposed to be, and none of it changed anything. What finally hit me was this: nothing gets better when I keep hiding from the truth. Nothing gets lighter when I keep carrying it alone. I had to stop letting old pain make new decisions for me. I had to stop letting one version of my past tell me who I was allowed to become. Facing all of it didn't fix everything overnight, but it did something I hadn't felt in a long time. It gave me a place to start, a place to breathe, a place to feel some inner peace. Taking a quick pause here. If this episode is resonating, I would love for you to follow the No One Is Normal podcast on whatever platform you listen on. Every follow helps this show reach people who might need these stories. Now let's jump back in. Writing this book taught me things I didn't expect. Healing is not a straight line. It's messy. It's inconsistent. It's 2 steps backwards, 1 step forward, sometimes the other way around. It taught me that shame was heavy, but it gets lighter when you stop trying to hold it. It taught me that honesty, real honesty, is painful at first, but incredibly freeing in the long run. It taught me that you cannot change what you refuse to confront. And maybe the most significant lesson, it taught me that I'm not alone, and neither is anyone listening. Behind every smile, there's a story. Behind every person who looks put together, there's something they survived. Behind every strong person, there was a moment they had to choose strength because it was all they had. We are all carrying something, but we don't have to carry it the same way forever. If you're listening right now, this part is for you. Your story matters, even the parts you wish never happened, even the chapters you never spoken of, even the moments you still carry in absolute silence. You don't have to be perfect to speak the truth. You don't need to have everything figured out. You don't need to wrap it up in a nice, neat bow. You just need to be honest. Honest with yourself, and eventually honest with others. Because somewhere out there, someone is living a life they don't talk about. And your story might be the thing that tells them they are not alone. If you feel ready to share your story, even a piece of it, I want to hear it. I want to hear how you overcame a moment or a long struggle, or how you learned to forgive yourself. This podcast, No One Is Normal, will feature real people with real stories. Stories of survival, stories of rebuilding, stories of pain, hope, and identity. Stories like yours. If you want a chance to share your story, anonymously or openly, reach out. You never know who you might be able to help by speaking the silent part out loud. What this podcast is and is not. I do want to make one thing crystal clear. I'm not here to give answers. I'm not here to tell anyone how to live or what to do. That's not what this podcast is. I'm also not here to create a place to complain about life. That doesn't help anyone grow. That doesn't help anyone heal. There may be guest counselors, social workers, or life coaches from time to time. Maybe more often depending on the topic. We'll do our best to talk through the things that matter. But I can't guarantee every issue or question will be addressed. What I am here to do is share stories. Stories of people who went through hard things, people who faced their mess head on, people who found a way to feel better and make changes in their lives. The book isn't just a story about my life. It's a reminder that every one of us has chapters we've survived, chapters we rarely talk about, chapters we sometimes wish we could erase. Chapters are meant to end so a new one can begin. Bonnie's story in the book is an example of that. She walked back into pain she never wanted to revisit, not for attention, not for validation, but because she knew someone out there needed to hear it. And that's what this whole project was all about. It wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about approval. It's not about fitting in. It's about honesty, your identity, healing, and becoming who you always were meant to be. So if you take anything from this, let it be this. Let's start a movement of self-forgiveness and healing. And let's learn from each other's stories. Thank you. Just a reminder, the stories and conversations in this podcast are for informational and personal reflection only. Nothing shared here should be taken as medical, legal, or professional advice. Always speak with a qualified professional about your own personal situation. Thank you for listening to No One Is Normal. If today's message resonated with you, you can find the book No One Is Normal on Amazon and Kindle, and explore more resources at www.bradhhill.com or www.nooneisnormal.co. Remember, you weren't meant to be normal, you were meant to be you.